Good morning, ProSim classmates. This is Missy Mathis again, and I'm going to talk with you this morning about accountability in service learning, outcomes and measures. This is my project for the out-of-class assignment number 3. On the screen, you can see the Venn diagram, which is sort of the mission statement from the Service Learning Division at Cape Fear Community College. And you can see that it sort of highlights areas of service, academics, civic responsibility, and reflection that all relate to the service learning experience. The main idea behind this is that we provide students with an opportunity to volunteer in their community and apply what they're learning in college in that volunteer experience. Now, I want to take a minute and read to you just an excerpt from the Cape Fear Community College mission statement. It's a rather lengthy statement, but the first bit I think is what's most important for our purposes. Cape Fear Community College is an open-door, multi-campus, comprehensive community college that strengthens the academic, economic, social, and cultural life of the citizens of New Hanover and Pender counties. Now, the thing that struck me most about that is it sort of pulls in the social, cultural, economic things related to the community and refers to the students as citizens as well as non-students. So I just think that sets the framework for kind of thinking about why Cape Fear Community College offers service learning, and most colleges do. In my developmental psychology class, the service learning activity entails having students volunteer out in their community, either here in Wilmington or if they would prefer to volunteer in their home community, that's certainly acceptable as well. But the requirement is that they work 15 hours in the community of their choice, and then they have to write a paper about it. In the paper, they're required to reflect on their volunteer experience and to talk about what they did and who they were working with, and to relate it back to what they learned in the classroom. One of the things that I sort of limit students to in terms of their volunteer experience is that it must be something working with humans. And that's pretty much the only limitation. So they can work in a preschool, they can work in a school setting, tutoring students. If they're more interested in working with adults, they can work in nursing homes and places of that sort. Pretty much anything that they do as long as it's volunteer work and that they're interacting with humans. And the reason I say that is obvious because it's a developmental psychology class, and in order for them to be able to relate what they're doing in the community back to what they've learned in class, there needs to be some human interaction. And so really things like, working at the Arboretum or some sort of animal wildlife rescue, these are things that have come up in the past, and I've kiboshed those. But anything where they're working with individual humans is fine at any stage of the lifespan. My goal for this assignment was to give students an opportunity to get out of their own head and get out of the classroom and experience life in all of its glory out in a volunteer experience, and to be able to then relate that back in a meaningful way to what's being learned in the classroom. So in terms of learning outcomes, I have 4. The first one is that students will understand psychological concepts related to human development more in depth. The second one is that students will be able to apply information learned in developmental psychology to real-life situations. And these two are very intricately related. Obviously, the more they can apply things to real-life situations, the more in-depth understanding they'll have of those concepts. Number 3 is that students will develop critical thinking skills. I think that pretty much wherever students are interacting with other human beings in a volunteer capacity, they're going to have to develop critical thinking skills to work successfully with those individuals. And then number 4, my outcome is that students will become more active citizens in the U.S. And we all have read research related to the positive impact of college on students, and one of the things that we've read quite a bit about in several different classes, I think, over the several years, is that going to college creates citizens that are more active and interested in giving back to their community in a variety of different ways. And so my thinking is that if students get that kind of benefit from college in general, that providing them an opportunity to kind of get a jump start on that in a classroom setting where they're getting course credit and grades associated with it might actually enhance that even more. So just for kicks and giggles, because the more academically related learning outcomes are relatively easy for me to assess, I thought, let me take on the one that's a little bit harder. How can I become a good citizen? So of my 4 learning outcomes, I'm going to tackle the 4th one. And I thought a lot about sort of how we can create active citizenship among students. And I think that this is a good opportunity, a good activity for students to do to accomplish that. But then the question becomes, how do we measure it? How do we know whether volunteering in a classroom setting can increase the likelihood that students will continue to volunteer after they've graduated? And so for my assessment, I picked a longitudinal study where I'm going to follow my service learning students after their school career is ended. And for sort of purposes of time and money constraints and sort of thinking about how I could do this assessment without spending the rest of my life collecting data, I'm going to do a 1-year and a 5-year post-graduation check-in with these students. In order to have good data, I'm going to also follow a group of non-service learning students, so students who chose the other optional assignment to just sort of write a term paper at the 1-year and 5-year mark as well, so that I can sort of compare means of students who were service learners in college compared to those who were not. So I'm going to create a survey, and in this survey I'm going to ask questions that measures the extent to which they volunteer outside, in the community. And to quantify that, I'm going to ask how many hours they serve on a volunteer basis per week. Now, the challenge with that is we're going to have to very carefully operationalize volunteer hours. Does it have to be a nonprofit organization? Can it be a profit organization? Do like PTA things count? Because, lots of people do that once they become parents. So in order to implement this assessment, I would have to spend some time thinking very carefully about sort of an operational definition for volunteer hours. And then additionally, on my survey, I would have to ask questions to sort of determine the extent to which the volunteerism can be attributed back to their service learning experience in college. And so I'll have to ask questions sort of targeting that behavior. Once I have collected all the data, my plan would be to compare the means of hours served on a volunteer basis for the previous service learning group compared to the group of students who did not service learn previously, and to just see if there's any significant differences there at the 1-year and then again at the 5-year mark. It certainly might be interesting to also collect some qualitative data and have some interviews, phone interviews even, with some of these students after the fact, but I just feel like that would become costly and difficult to then try to interpret on an individual case-to-case basis. So I think quantitative is really the way to go with this particular assessment. So I will just note on a sort of unrelated issue that students do report to me after they've done this assignment that they do appreciate having done the assignment, which is one of the reasons why I thought this assessment of sort of becoming a good citizen might be a good one, because I feel like a lot of my students who have never previously volunteered in their community at all have done so for this project, and then many of them report to me, sort of anecdotally of course, that they plan to continue working in their community, many times in the organization where they've started as a result of my class, and in other cases they've talked about switching gears and doing something different, but that volunteering is something they've kind of gotten bitten by the bug, if that makes some sense. And so I just feel like doing an assessment of this will be a good way to sort of verify the anecdotal data that I hear from the students in the classroom. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you all have a great day.